Hello guys, this is Matt from Offroad Experts, and today we're going to be talking about Fox Racing Shocks 2.0 Performance Series, and we're going to be looking inside those beautiful aluminium bodies. So 2.0 Performance Series comes in different shapes and mounts, and it comes with a coilover, snap ring, adjustable LSC with reservoir, and just a plain simple aluminium body like this one. It is the basic of the Fox line, but there's nothing basic about the shocks, and I'm going to tell you why that happened exactly by looking inside and seeing what kind of technology is locked inside. So all those shocks in here are for different vehicle: front, rear, spring, no spring, reservoir, adjustable, threaded or snap ring. They all a little bit different, but there's quite a few similarities along the whole line of Performance Series 2.0. So let's take a deep look at how this shock is made and what's inside. So every single 2.0 shock consists of 2-inch diameter aluminium body. This is extruded aluminium. That means it's being cold pressed from a single aluminium block. Quite expensive, and also really strong pipe. Nice and thick, brushed and clear anodized. Some of the parts will be black anodized, like this end in here, or this part, just to keep those shocks rust free. Also, every single shock have a 5/8 of an inch chrome plated shaft. This is strong enough and way bigger, way thicker than most of the similar sized shocks on the market. So every single shock, every single one of them consists of the shaft, a steel head and a piston, and most importantly the IFP piston. That's internal floating piston. Let's have a look inside what happens with that piston when the shock moves. So the IFP piston isolates the air, actual nitrogen, from the oil. There's no nitrogen in the oil, and there's no oil in the air. That separates it, and it's a very important part, because each time the shock compresses, the shaft moves inside, and it actually takes much more space. Every centimeter that it actually moves, there is more volume of that shaft inside your shock. So the actual oil have to move somewhere, because it's liquid, it doesn't compress at all, and a liquid in this case moves in here to the reservoir, and the piston goes up and down. There's a charge of nitrogen, about 200-250 psi, depends on each shock, and the oil actually compresses that chamber with the nitrogen. What happened with a single shock like this one? The chamber is super small, like few centimeters, maybe 2-3 centimeters, and there's a high pressure, and every time you compress the shock, the actual pressure rises, and it rises all the time. So this shock will be always harder. The more it goes inside, the more the shaft goes inside, the shock should be harder. Obviously that depends on the actual piston, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, but the most important thing, most of those shocks will be progressive thanks to that IFP piston. So this is the answer for why those shocks are so good, and also it's the answer for quite a lot of questions. Why my shocks is extending by itself? It's because once you press it, you create more pressure, and that pressure is just going to be moving the oil back in its place and removing the shaft from the shock. Not really removing, but moving it outside, extending it. So overly in 2.0 shocks, there's quite a lot of oil. That means it's a good cooling, especially with the aluminium body. It cools really well. So it's a good shock for driving for a long period of time over like a speed bumps or like a fast terrain, even with a single body. And what happens with the reservoir, there's even more oil inside, because you don't have to take up the space for the IFP and nitrogen inside the main body. You actually have a bit more space in the reservoir. So there's more oil, and there's also that chamber with the nitrogen is much larger. That means if you compare same shock for same car, same lift, with reservoir, without. This one's definitely going to be a little bit harder, especially on the end travel. So once you're going to compress it, it's going to be much harder in a way. The beginning stroke might be still very comfortable, but with the reservoir, you actually can expect a little bit plush ride, more plush than a single body. So with the reservoir shocks like this one, you're gaining a little bit plusher ride, and it's also better cooling thanks to more oil volume and the fact that actual oil is moved outside of the shock. Sometimes like this one, this reservoir goes behind your front bumper and it actually gets a little bit of a wind cooling. So this is a good stuff. Obviously you get with every Fox shocks you get a clamp to mount it. This one goes to the frame with a nice alloy clamps that goes over the reservoir. And on the other option, you get a clamp to clamp the reservoir to the body. Sometimes there's just no place to put this inside a wheel well and you have to move it outside. Obviously, if you choose the right shock for your right vehicle, this is going to be sorted for you. You don't have to worry about this. The last but not least option is the one with the reservoir and the LSC compression adjuster. The LSC stands for low speed compression, and it adjusts how much the shock reacts when it compresses slowly. That means tilting the vehicle, when you're braking, when you're accelerating, the vehicle moves up and down, or just going slowly in an off-road when the wheel goes into the ditch and you use more than just a bit of a travel. You use more of the travel, but the shaft speed is really slow. And how this works, I'm going to show you an actual compression adjuster like this. This one's built into the reservoir. Come have a look how this looks in details, because it's quite interesting. So where the shock compresses, the oil goes through this port, through the hose that's attached to this, into the reservoir, through the shim stack, and you have the option to regulate the flow by turning the knob. You actually open and close this little bypass port. And what happens when you close it? Have a look. It's almost no place for oil to go. I'm going to open it now, and once you open it, there's more oil flow. That means the shock's going to be moving faster. And once you close it, there's going to be less oil flow. That means the shock's going to be moving slower, but that's only for the compression. It doesn't affect much of the rebound. Unfortunately, if you have independent front suspension and you require a coilover up front of your vehicle, you don't have option of a reservoir or LSC adjustment. There is no such thing. But the good stuff is you do get a spring. This is Eibach springs, so super good quality springs, and those springs comes in different spring rates. So depending on your vehicle, obviously you get the right spring rate for you straight in the box, and usually those shocks like this one in here are adjustable from about 0 to 2, sometimes up to 3 inches of lift. Usually if it's 2-inch lift, this comes adjusted straight in the top position, so you just bolt it on and it's ready to go. So if you do require a harder spring, we can order spring rate that's matched to whatever you carry up front of your vehicle. If it's just a winch, especially synthetic one, those springs will hold it very nicely, especially on the coilover option. The body is threaded and you can actually adjust it just a little bit more preload on this adjuster. There is one more option. If you don't have extra weight, if you want to use factory springs, you can buy this snap ring option. This is also 2.0 performance, but it doesn't have Eibach springs. You just put the factory spring in here, factory top mount, and there is usually about 3 options to adjust using that snap ring. It's 0, 1 and 2-inch lift. So a pretty good option, really budget. You don't pay for the top mount, you don't pay for the spring, but you do have a Fox 2.0 on your factory spring. If your vehicle's stock, you can use that easily. There is one more very important part of those shocks that seems to be common, and every single shock has them, but every single application has them a little bit different. The piston and the shim stack. That's the one that moves up and down and the oil flows through it. And depends on your application, there's a different shim stack just to make this works for the specific vehicle. Okay, so this is how this looks like up close. This is your piston and the shim stack on both ends, and when the shock compresses, the oil goes through this port and end up bending those little shims. And when the shock extends, when there's a rebound, the oil goes through those ports and it end up bending a top shim stack. Let's have a look inside how this looks like exactly. You can see the shim stack. So now you can see there's a port in here. When the shock extends, the oil goes through here and it goes through this port under the shim stack. And what happens when there's a high velocity of the shaft, you can expect those shims to bend to release the oil. I'm going to show you now. This is nice and flexible, and depends on what kind of shims you got and what kind of configuration. You can actually adjust this way the way the shock moves up and down. The bottom shim stack's a little bit different, obviously, and every single shock is different in this way. They all have shim stacks, but the shim stacks are made of different shims, different thickness, different size, and different configuration. So the whole idea in those shims is to design the way the oil flows through the piston, depending on the velocity of the shaft. If it moves quicker, it's going to be bending the oil is going to be bending the shims much easier. On the beginning, the oil will hit the first shim that's nice and flexible, and then that shim's going to rely on another one and another one. And the more pressure, actually harder it is to bend all the shims together. That means in this case, this is a progressive setup, and this is a rebound in this shock. Most of the 2.0 have a progressive rebound, but this is a compression, and first 2-3 shims are nice and flexible. They are really easy to bend, and those will set up your shock to be nice and soft on the beginning of the travel, and then mid-range is going to be working with pretty much no restriction, because those small shims are not going to stop, well, at least not much. They're not going to stop the big shims, but when you hit something hard, those shims will bend and reach out to the next ones, and those 3 are much thicker than those. So you're probably not going to see it in a video, but I can actually fit it. Those are much thicker, and they are pretty much the same size, and all together they are really stiff. So if you hit something hard, if you land a jump, the shock's not going to compress fully, it's not going to bottom out. So this is a good setup for overall driving, nice and soft, mid-range, going through the whole travel almost, and then with the really fast velocity, really fast shaft movement, those shims going to stop you from bottoming out, which probably going to work almost like a bump stop. So as you can see, Fox actually has designed each shock to perform flawlessly on every vehicle. Depends on the application, you have the shim stack difference, but the main thing is that you can actually change it. This shock is completely rebuildable. You can service it, you can replace the seals, you can change the shims, and the cool stuff is that you can adjust it to the way you want to ride it. It might be not very optimal to actually spend a lot of money on this shock, but every single shock from Fox Racing Shocks is like that. So if you look on the bottom of your shock, there is a top cap and the seal head. The seal head is quite interesting because it's much better than the standard shocks, and this consists of the top cap with the scraper seal. This actually takes all the dirt from the shaft. There's a bump stop, and there's another wiper seal in the side, and on the other side there's a main seal. That's super tight Teflon seal that holds the shaft really tight, and it keeps it nice and sturdy and stiff. And this means this shock will not require service for a long time, but if it does, you can still get all those seals. This one as well, you can replace it and have your shock like brand new after a few years of driving. If you do want to service your 2.0 shocks, you can buy such a service kit through our web shop, and this consists of everything. Obviously, you do have to have the skills, the knowledge, and the right tools to do it. I wouldn't recommend doing it at home. There's a Teflon band for your piston, there's a bump stop for coilovers, a top mount for some of the shocks, the bump stop, the internal, external, even the nut, the main seal, scraper seals, and all the small ones. This kit will do for both LSC with the reservoir, just a straight one, and all the coilovers and the snap ring. So it's a one kit for all the shocks, and this is ready to buy on our shelf in the warehouse. Many of you guys are asking questions, should I go with the Bilstein or Fox 2.0? And the Fox 2.0 is very similar to the Bilstein B8 5100, at least internally. There's a IFP chamber, there's a nitrogen charge, and the inside is almost the same diameter. It looks smaller because it's steel bodied. You can compare it in here. The outside of the Fox is much thicker because it's made of aluminum, as it has to be. But the main difference on those shocks is the valving. You cannot service that. There's a main seal straight outside of the body, and you have to use that rubber shield to protect it from any mud and debris. You don't have to do it on the Fox racing shocks because there's a scraper seal that scrapes the dirt off your shaft. That's pretty useful. You sometimes get a shock with the rubber boot, but that's only because the shaft is pointed downwards, and the shock boot is actually only protecting the shaft from any debris, any scratches and stuff like that. So the rubber is just for protection, not to keep the shock clean. There's a digressive piston. That means you have a little bit more force on the beginning of the stroke. So to move this shock, you will have to force it a little bit harder. That doesn't mean you can actually go harder off-road. That only means it's going to be more stable when you're driving on a flat ground, on asphalt. It's going to be really nice. Fox is not going to be like that. It's going to be nice and soft. If you push it harder off-road, the Fox will forgive much more of the rough terrain. At the beginning of this movie, I did told you this is a basic of all the Foxes that are made for truck application, and this is true, but there's nothing basic about this shock. This is a high performing shock, and the biggest enemy of the high performing shock is actual heat. In most cases, in the cheap shocks, the heat will just make your shock fade after a long period of use, and Fox put a lot of work to keep the heat out of the shock. There's an aluminium body, there's a large piston, there's a lot of oil in it, and there's an IFP chamber to keep the oil from aeration. And this is very important because this shock is made to be used harder than a usual standard shock like Bilstein or like any double barrel shock. So guys, if you're looking for a great performing shock for your off-road adventures, high-speed gravel or hard terrain, the Fox 2.0 Performance Series is definitely the way to go. If you need more information about Foxes, stay on the channel, subscribe, because we're going to be talking about all the lines from Fox Racing shocks. And if you have any questions, comment under the movie and I'll personally answer every single one of them. See you next time. So there's one downside of Fox Racing shocks. They don't give free marks like Bilstein.